Yeah, so we thought we would start by talking about the origins of why we do this work and the origins of the groups.
Yeah, so when our second son, Blackwood, was about 3, I wanted to gather with other parents in the forest and basically just have a forest immersion time, which we used to run every Friday mornings. And so parents and little kids from babes in arm to about 5-year-olds came along, and we lit fire, we sang, we created little circles of connection, usually starting the day with that. And yeah, just being in the forest, just making space to be in a forest in a much more than human environment. And yeah, so that was trying to establish community similar to what I had as a childhood growing up. So my mum and the other mums, while predominantly the dads, if there were dads on the scene, were at work, would take us kids out into the forest for big bush walks, and we'd usually cook something up on fire, and in the summer months go swimming, and just having that constant immersion. But I also lived near some really wild patches where we kids were allowed to free range, take out knives and make things with carvings, be pretty much free to explore and to fall in love with the sweet nectar of honeysuckle vine, sucking out the honey from that, and to yabby down at the creek and bring a whole bunch of yabbies home for mum to convert into yabby quiche. She would say, put them back unless you get over 23, because otherwise there wasn't enough for a yabby quiche. So yeah, just the wild play and the noticing by the time I became a parent just how much more conformed to indoor and screen children around me was, and concerned about that and wanting to build culture around being in a forest. And because we live on the edge of town and the edge of a forest, it was easy to invite that in. And there are many forests around here, so we're really privileged to live in such a beautiful place with so much Mother Goddess forestry around us. So yeah, we ran that session was called Make and Play, and Meg would come and join at the end and bring tea and finish off. And then as Woody got older, his older brother started to get in quite a lot of trouble. Some of you may have seen our film, our documentary. I won't go into that now. But yeah, our eldest son was really a product of not finding his tribe and being highly pathologized in a industrial school setting, like so many boys are, and how that pathologization pushed him along by the time he was 15 into some serious trouble. And so the next iteration of Make and Play was, as Woody was getting older, was to really try to create a habitat for not only troubled boys, but boys that were struggling in a school environment to come after school on, I think it was a Wednesday afternoon, to get into the forest. And we do things like blackberry surf down these steep gullies. I'd give them all a board, and just like rough and tumble play, like I guess the sort of thing we used to get up to without adult supervision, but we also didn't take things quite that far as far as some of the kids in this town were taking things. So I really wanted to harness that beautiful boy energy and just put it into something good, like the stewarding of the forest, but doing it in a ruckus and high-bodied way. And I feel like this is very politically incorrect, but I feel like in the schools around here and possibly throughout the whole Western society, is the emptying out of male teachers for various reasons, and there isn't an awareness around how to steer boy trouble energy into some place that's magnificent and beautiful. And so this story of grief I watched in my own son. I'm not saying that schools were the only issue in this. That was a complex of issues that that is embodied in his story and our story. But it was really wanting to work with kids in a particularly boy. Well, this was only a boys group, not by design, but I think because of more so by activity. Then COVID came, and that sort of put a stop for a moment on all things like that. And when we rebuilt it, the forest group, or renewed it, the third stage, which is what it's in at the moment, is what we call Forest and Free. And the Forest and Free kids are a big cross-section of kids, boys and girls, who are ages 8 to 14. Thanks, Meg. And that came, rather than a Friday morning for preschool kids or Wednesday afternoon for school kids, this became, because there was so much rejection of schooling through COVID, just the mask mandates, just a lot of the anxiety, the depression in schools. COVID itself caused a huge amount of mental anguish in young people. So for us, of course, the antidote is to have children in the forests, because of just the well-being that comes from being rewired by Mother Country. And so with such a huge surge of homeschoolers and unschoolers and post-schoolers and not at schoolers, we were able to gather up around, I think there's 25 kids now on our books that regularly come. We usually have between 15 and 20 at every Monday for a whole day. And so that's really, they're the three main stages. We've got lots to tell about this, but I think I'll hand over to you, Mo.
Sure. Where to begin? I might kind of begin as the day starts. So we gather in the street outside our house, and the kids play and the parents talk, and we run it as volunteers. We offer it in the gift economy, and with an honorarium. So we say for families who are in the gift economy, we gratefully accept any gift. So it's usually home-cooked meals or fresh produce or seedlings or hand-me-downs for Woody, loaves of freshly baked bread, all kinds of delicious gifts. Or if families are still operating more in the monetary economy, then it's $20 per child per day. So it's affordable, even if there are quite a few families have 2 kids. We feel that that's really fair, and we're in a position, we're debt free and in a position to offer it in this way. So that feels like a really a good exchange for our household, and a healthy exchange for the families as well. Like it's doable. So we gather outside, people bring gifts and we bring them inside. And then we call out, pack your bags, and, grab your bags and let's head into the forest. And we head down to the fire circle, where we also have different community celebrations and different seasonal rituals, as well as the men's and women's groups that gather there in circle. And we head down to the fire circle, and has a whole lot of, it's in a circle with a fire pit in the middle, dug out, and a number of logs. So everybody, sits on a log, and most often we have our goats in there as well. So the goats gather around and they sniff everybody's bags, hoping to find an apple or a banana or something that can be gifted. They're even happy to accept orange and mandarin peel. Do you want to take over from there?
Yeah, and then as we all settle down, either Meg, who's Magpie in the forest, and my forest name is Blue Wren, one of us says, "Where are we?" And the kids popcorn. Someone says, "On Earth," or
in the universe,
or Jarrah Mother Country,
or on a log near a goat,
at the fire circle, or
in circle, or
with each other. And so that might go on for a while, and really with an invitation to expand the collective consciousness with imagination about where we actually are in that very moment. And that's just a little, almost a little game, really, like a word game and a play game to make it more interesting each time. So we start with that, and then
and also to locate us in where we are. We're emplacing. We're not just in a room cut off from the world. We're actually in the world.
Yeah, and that usually then segues to an honoring of country. So once we've had fun with where we actually are, we ground it by acknowledging country, and not in a bureaucratic sense, not by rote. Many years ago, we spoke to a friend of ours, Beck Phillips, who's a Jarrah storyteller and story holder, and mother and emerging leader. And we said, how, if we are to give a acknowledgement of country, would you prefer a heartfelt acknowledgement of country, or the one by rote, the one that's scripted for institutions or places like that? And she said, by far, by heart, that's what it's all about. So our acknowledgement of country is almost like the whole day. It's just weaving mother country into it, rather than some sort of politically correct statement of white guilt. It's basically how we are for the rest of the day. But of course, right in the first circle, we're also bringing mother goddess, mother country cosmology into the circle. And we often talk about this mother country in terms of the season, what's happening at the moment, what's happening below our feet, in the canopies above, through all the different musings and ramblings and workings of the forest.
Yep. And from there, we start our check-in circle, still sitting in the forest. And the check-in circle, we go around, we each introduce ourselves by our forest name, and we've written some of them up here to remember them. Do you want to read them out?
Yeah, we have brown snake and blackwood and phascogale and possum and eagle, and we've had a koala, we've got a rose robin, a rufous fantail. As I said, I'm Blue Wren and Magpie.
And Woody is his given name, Blackwood. And our dog, Lily Pilly, who has a very spirally tail, she's ringtail possum, and she has a check-in as well. And we each go around and just say what we've arrived with. How are you going today? And sometimes we'll have a question like, what are you loving about the season? Or what's something in your lunchbox that you're looking forward to eating? Or, tell us something about the last week that you think is interesting or exciting that you've done or that you've shared. And, that is also really a great time for us to, if there are kids who are tired or if there's a big thing happening in their lives, they'll share it. I'm really happy to be here, but my grandmother's in hospital, so I'm feeling a little bit sad and looking forward to visiting her, on the weekend. So then we can kind of clock where people are at. And, there are sometimes the kids, there's a dog barking next door for hours and they're really tired because they didn't sleep. So that's also great for us. Just to know, to gauge where people are at. What else do we do in the check-in? So after the check-in,
usually someone says, "Can I go first?"
Yeah.
And then from that person, we go sunwise.
Yeah. And we also say, we also say that they don't need to share if they don't want to. And sometimes it takes some of the kids a couple of times of sitting in circle before they're ready.
Sometimes a year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Rarely, but.
Yeah. And also before the kids arrive. So if we have a new kid wanting to come, before they come, we send notes to the parents. Just sort of outlining our philosophy on what this group is, the kinds of activities that we do, what to pack in their bags. And we also invite the parents of new kids to come and join in the circle if they want to for the first time, or every time if they want to. Usually the kids might want their parent to come once or twice and then say, no, I'm good now, you don't need to come. And also kids who take a little bit more time to feel comfortable in a group. Sometimes they'll come to a few check-in circles and then go home because they're not quite ready to leave their parents. And then sometimes they say, yes, Mum, come down to the circle. And then halfway there, they say, Mum, I'm okay, you can go. And then they stay for the rest of the day.
Yeah, so before we leave the circle, after we've done the check-in, if there are any new kids, we usually have a humorous telling of how we do respectful bush poos in the forest. We have a digging stick that we take with us, and we have a little roll of toilet paper. And usually someone puts their hands up to demonstrate the art of sacred shitting in the forest. And so that's usually highly amusing. So that any other business that's coming up, then there's a question of, right, we're heading in.
Not yet, we do branches.
Oh, yes. Thanks.
So we also do this thing called branches. So we don't have a list of all the kids there. We don't, Blue Wren and I don't have to count all the kids. So you're the trunk, and the two on either side of you are your branches. So we each go around, say that your name again and the names of your branches, and all throughout the day, Blue Wren and I call out, check your branches, and then you have to eyeball your branches. So yeah, it's just a way of accounting for one another, and that works really well. And more recently, we have been sort of throughout the day whistling. And then we have to gather in the same order of circle that we gathered in that morning around the fire, at the fire circle. So wherever we are, sometimes we're going for a really big walk, and then Blue Wren will whistle, and then we quickly got to gather in that same order. And that's a lot of fun, kind of wiggling around and, no, that was last week, I was next to you. And
especially when we're doing it on a very fine, clear goat track, and we have to create a circle. That's about this wide, the track, and then there's a cliff. That's fun. But then when we're heading off, we grab our bags. Usually the check-in circles about half an hour in the morning, and it's just we've explained the sort of formalities, but things come up in it, and there's really good conversations, whether about what someone has shared or something that's going on in the world, something that's going on seasonally.
Yeah, we also have there's a lot of hawthorn trees in that particular part of the forest, and there are a lot of ringtail possum drays. So often there'll be a new dray somewhere around there. So
a dray is a fully enclosed nest.
So we'll count the drays in one particular area, or
or there'll be a visitation from a particular bird species that will come right in above us. And so sometimes that's the delivery of a bush name as well, because the invitation for our forest names is connection. And if everyone is sitting there with a bush name and there's a new child there, and there's this beautiful visitation on that particular day, that child may well, and has in the past, claimed that bird or claimed that animal.
And so we have the bush names as Patrick said, an invitation to name yourself. It can be anything from the forest. And we have a boy who comes called Ember, and we've had Silent Night before. So they are also, very creative. And some kids change their bush names quite regularly, but most have had theirs from the very beginning, including there are a couple of kids who have came to Make and Play 10 years ago and still come, and they've still got the same bush names. So that's really lovely. And
some kids have two, like Tawny Gang Gang, for example. Tawny Frogmouth, which is like an owl, and Gang Gang is a bird, a fruitarian.
Yeah, and we also have Pinecone the Pardalote. Yep. And some of the parents have bush names as well now, which is also really lovely.
So moving on from the fire circle, because direction is I guess an ecological skill or a knowledge that we're losing through navigation through GPS. And this, I think there's lots of studies around showing how pre-GPS taxi drivers had this huge part of their amygdala, thank you, that was expansive, because they could basically navigate around a massive city like London and just through memory, and how that just immediately has decreased because of GPS. So the same with all our children, the same with adults. So as we're leaving the circle and asking kids to gather up their bags, and I always say we're heading off in a such and such direction.
Southwesterly.
It might be southwesterly, it might be easterly, it might be, it's not usually northerly, because that's the town. But often there's a number of different directions we can have. And so I ask the kids to point. And so one child might point, and I don't immediately say that's correct or incorrect. They all have to point, and then they all start to feel it. And as a group, they kind of work out where to go. So really trying to bring that into their consciousness. And of course, being guided by the sun, and understanding the sun in its patterns as a high east-west arc to what we have at the moment in the southern hemisphere is almost the lowest arc of the sun's orbit, yearly orbit. So then we're heading off, and where there are many different tracks, and usually there is in the early days, Meg and I would speak a lot about, particularly in the morning, like the first activity needed to be so specific. But now we just trust country, and we head off, usually through an intuition, or maybe a conversation, or maybe there's mushrooms in that part of the forest, so let's head there. Or we need to do a head count of the goats, and they're in this large part of the forest. Let's spread out and do that. And last week, for example, we did that, and came across our old 15-year-old buck who was dead. And so the next part of the day was several of us carrying old Rodmel from the shelter where he took his last breath to an old mine shaft where we put our goats that have gone into retirement and naturally passed away rather than being taken to the knackery and lowered down into the mine shaft, and then we cover over with mulch. So that, so that was such an opportunity to connect with death and mortality and ritual, the saying farewell to a loved herd member.
Yeah, and on the way from the shelter to his burial place, all the kids, there was an invitation to take something from the forest that was beautiful, and then to lay that in with him.
And then we all went around, and people were invited to say some honoring words, and a number of us did and spoke really eloquently.
Yeah, and there were two sisters who last week put their dog down. So there was lots of emotions there that came up for them about just death of loved animals and loved ones.
But this is what it is to trust the living of the world as your main guide in such, when children play outside of the adult realm. This is how they play. They allow Mother Country, they allow the day, they allow what they come across to inform their play,
and this is their feeling.
Yeah, and how they learn. And intuition is a really big part of reclaiming the mother or the goddess, and goddess cosmology culture. So sort of textbooks or lists and lesson plans and stuff like that, that's a highly masculine. It's really crazy because modern industrial schooling is total patriarchy. Like, the institution is a colonial playbook, and yet it's populated by women. It's such a paradox. And so intuition, which is a very feminine, wonderful part of our intelligence, is diminished in a very patriarchal setting. So one of the things we're really conscious of is elevating intuition, and also that thing, to go back to the notes we send out to parents before they come. It's really about the relationship between safety and risk. And that in school, which again is another very patriarchal thing of control, its risk mitigation is everything. It's all about safety rather than a risk-safe balance or a risk-safe relationship or dance. And so one of the real purposes of what we're doing at Forest and Free is not courting irresponsible risk, but actually enabling the day to unfold so that each of us comes up against or into or face to face with decisions, and we need to make a decision. And whether we scale that really tall tree, we're not great. Say, for example, one child is not a particularly great tree climber, but can see a child 40 feet up in the air and wants to learn that, and may take after that child. And the attitude might be a bit competitive at first, which can put you in a risky situation. But by listening to themselves, they get 20 feet up and say, hey, that's enough for today. And there's no one saying, go on, go further, go further. It's like, wow, well done.
And there's no one saying, come down.
Yeah.
You've gone too high.
That's even more important. Oh, get down. Yeah. That's terrible.
And one of the things that we have in the notes that we send out to new parents is about this shared risk agreement. Yeah. So if they send their kids, that we take a third of the risk and of the responsibility, us too. The parents take a third and the child themselves takes a third. And this is not a legal binding agreement. This is a community offering, and it's a trust model. That's what it is.
Yeah.
So when a kid hurts themselves, we say, congratulations, you've been in the forest. And we say, if you haven't been stung or burnt or bitten or cut or grazed or bruised, then you haven't been in the forest. And when a kid hurts themselves and everybody says, they say, oh, I'm covered in blackberry scratches and I'm bleeding. Everyone says, congratulations, you've been in the forest. This is like a badge of honor, or this is like it's a small initiation that they've been through, a little rite of passage.
Yeah. And what we like to say at Forest and Free is that we're cultivating, each of us are cultivating soft hearts, so compassionate, deep listening hearts, but tough bodies. And I think that's almost the exact opposite of the industrial mindset. Have hard hearts, that sort of competitive, capitalist, highly masculine,
desensitized,
colonial institutional setting is tough heart. So, mock culture, that's how it comes out in schools, where just put down culture is really prevalent, but actually then really very soft bodies that fall over and don't bounce back up, that don't have years from little tiny toddlers being able to fall down, or so appropriate body memory or muscle memory for falling, for hurting at all the ages is sort of wrapped in cotton wool. Childhoods, as we know, a great disservice to children, creates huge amounts of anxiety, and because it's teaching a learned helplessness. And when you teach learned helplessness, and yet you have a really bright and engaged mind that's stimulated by screens and constant noise, that's the recipe for hard hearts and soft bodies. So yeah, we're trying to flip that, and a forest does that.
Yeah.
This is not about like being macho tough. This is about just being resilient and hardy, and
responsible for yourself.
Yeah.
Have self accountability. Sometimes when we have new kids come, the parents would take us aside initially and say, look, my child has anxiety disorder or learning disability or ADHD, and we understand why they're wanting to tell us that, but really we say to them, that doesn't mean anything. They're just diagnoses and they mean nothing in a forest. In a forest, there's room for everything. There's room for everyone. That in a classroom that is a monoculture, kids who are different stand out. But in a forest, which is a polyculture, there's room for everybody.
Yeah, this is the thing about labeling, is that the labeling is for the institution to function as a monoculture. So in other words, it has to be in control, whereas a forest can absorb this radical. I will just go back a bit. When our eldest boy Zephyr was at school, they used to go for forest walks, but the teachers would walk like guards, keeping them on the track. And all the kids want to do is just run up to the tree and come back to, run up the hill and come back to the the track. And, because I was a parent that went on some of those walks, and I was just like absolutely gutted, particularly the boys, the lively boys, needed to burn that beautiful boy energy and sprint up to the tree and then climb the tree and then come back and be able to catch up with the rest of the group. They needed that level of freedom, and that conformed and controlled of their natural will to be free was curtailed. So this is just another story of why we created Forest and Free.
Yeah. And just to talk a little bit more about self-responsibility and accountability, sometimes we'll have kids, if we're going on a long walk, they'll say, oh, my bag's really heavy, can you hold it? Or, they'll take off their jumper and then sort of give it to one of us, or they'll ask us to help them with something. And obviously, if they need help doing up a zip on a jacket or something like that, we're going to say yes, but I'm not carrying anyone's bag. And, we carry a first aid kit. It has some, different herbal remedies and some Band-Aids. But if a kid hurts themselves, like we wear some plantain, which is some of you might know, which is like a bush Band-Aid, which is a little plant that we, whenever we're walking, we'll find, we'll spot it, and we'll call it out. And then, sometimes we'll take some with us. And we have one of the older girls, we mentioned her before, Tawny Gang Gang. She's 13, and she's a medicine woman, and she's always got herbal remedies, and she's always taking things that she's finding as we're going for walks and putting them in her bag. And she brings bandages from home, and she brings different tinctures and things that she makes with her mum. And yeah, it's just really lovely that there's room for her to have this role and to share her passion and her knowledges.
Yeah. So the practical skills that the kids acquire, not because we necessarily say today we're doing this. If it's freezing cold and it's wet, we will be doing, working on our shelters and doing fire by friction. What's the challenge? We need to get warm. Right, let's use fire strikers. How do we do that as a challenge in a wet forest? How do we find the tinder? So we could bring a lighter along and we could bring some newspaper, but it's like, this is the challenge, like always putting the children in a situation where they may well need this at some stage. If not, it's just a beautiful challenge for the day. Getting a fire going, rethatching the cubby. And I will just go back a bit. We're over the last 3 or 4 years, we've been actually building a village. And in the check-in circle at the beginning of the day, often kids will say, oh, I hope we go to the lake fishing, or I hope we go down to the river to the smoke hole. I hope we head to the village, so they'll give their sort of like, even though it's about how they're feeling, it's more like their desires for the day, their wish list for the day. And so we take all this in. So the village has become a really important place, both as a physical village of lots of different cubbies with a big community hearth or fire in the middle of it, where we do lots of demonstrations or the kids, not demonstrations so much, but we may bring some damper along and if kids haven't already learned how to make stick damper, they'll either learn from Magpie or us or from another child. This is the other thing too, is the encouragement to pass on knowledges and not always to defer to us. In fact, Magpie and I would say we spend a lot of the time just getting out of the way. That's really our important. It's like to create the day, create the set and setting. Probably what kids in the 50s, and certainly me to a fair degree in the 70s growing up, would just know what to go and do. But this has been taken out of our psyche, taken away from us. So that's why we're offering this, to tell this story here, and why we want to sort of say really what we're doing is like recreating what we've lost. There are a lot of things from the 70s and the 50s I'm glad we've lost, but there are a lot of things that we've lost which are just absolutely terrible. And, direction, knowing how to get a fire going, knowing how to climb trees and use knives respectfully, knowing how to climb a rock face, all this sort of stuff.
How to be cold and wet for a day.
Being chilled and going, oh, okay, I'm not temperature controlled today. This is interesting.
And just, I would like to talk more about some of the other skills that that the kids are learning. But I feel like we just going back to just sitting in circle, just how important that is. And we say to the kids, if you can be a good listener, and if you can sit here and, as the other 25 people around you in a circle check in, then if you can sit and listen, you're going to have really healthy relationships for the rest of your life if you can just master this one skill of sitting in circle. And also, there's echoes of the previous circle, the night before, because the men in fire choir that Patrick is part of meet every third Sunday. So every third Monday, there's remnants of the men sitting in circle, and we often mention that. And there's one family where we have one of the women comes to the women's circle, one of the, and her partner goes to the men's, and their child comes to the to Forest and Free. So that's also really special to have that bond.
Yeah.
You want to talk about some of the other skills?
Yeah. So look, swimming in wild water, it's not so much a skill, but it's a knowing that you're not going to die if you get into water that hasn't been chlorinated. And
you want to talk about that swim?
Yeah, there's a big swing that's put up at the local lake by some teenagers, in not supervised by adults, and it is a giant swing, and you have to climb up a tree to get it, and even climbing the tree to get it is pretty edgy. And some of our kids go on it, and because the lake is quite touristy at times, we tend to avoid it and just stay in the deeper forest. But occasionally it's such a beautiful day and kids want to fish, so we will come to the lake, and a number of the kids, the boys and the girls, scale the tree, jump on the swing and go out right over the water and come back. And it's a really long drop. It's probably, I don't know, maybe a two-meter drop when you actually, and you have to plan your landing as well, because it's a fair bit of reed and sort of crappy old bank. And
we went there 2 weeks in a row, and the first time I think it was just Woody and another boy who went on the rope, and then the next week there was a whole bunch more kids who were like, I didn't do it last week, but I really want to give it a go this week. And just to see them building that confidence, and that was really cool.
And at times, because Meg and I are the adults there, and particularly when we come into contact with the dominant culture, and there's all this consternation and worry and fear that's projected into this onto the kids, where it's a fine line. It's edgy, this work. We would be absolutely witch hunted by the media in Australia, these irresponsible hippies allowing these kids to do unsafe things. It's like, this is the risk. It is so important that some kids in this generation don't grow up with severe anxiety and severe mental illness and be medicated because they weren't allowed to be kids. They weren't allowed to explore and to edge up against risky things when they're ready for it. And many of the kids don't do that stuff. They either admire it or they might do it next year. But I think by creating an environment where there isn't peer pressure to do stuff, that's where the safety aspect comes in. Only do it if you really want to do this. No one should pressure you. You have to be in your own sovereignty to do anything. And just so maintaining that has meant that we've run this for years and years, and there are no bad accidents. There's cuts and scrapes.
No insurance.
Yeah, we don't have insurance.
Just the community insurance and the trust.
Yeah, so it's risky, it's edgy, but it's also I think this is the problem of reclaiming some sanity in an insane world. Is actually much of that reclaiming pushes up against bylaws and social taboos and consternation and safetyism. So anyway, we're up for that. And so some of the other things that kids do,
Knives.
Being adept at knives is really important. We talk about the blood circle, which is like only using a knife, not using a knife where your arm extends out to.
And if you're whittling, to only do it down towards the ground.
Yeah, and
we bring a knife sharpener and we sharpen the kids' knives if they're blunt, because a a sharp knife is less dangerous than a blunt one.
Yeah, a sharp knife can be controlled with very little pressure, whereas a blunt one sort of tends to create problems. So, yeah, teaching kids how to sharpen knives, but also more importantly, how to make things with a simple pocket knife.
Yeah.
And from, yabby spears to decorative walking sticks, even
lovely sticks. I'm just looking at all of our collection up there. I won't get it down there.
Cutting New Zealand flax, which grows around the district, in order to make baskets or to make cordage and things like this. So we've over the years we've learned more skills and shared them, but also some of the kids come who've had a passion in some area and they bring skills to share as well. It's sideways learning.
Yeah. And I feel like, as you mentioned before, one of the changes that we've, sort of has evolved is that initially we would say, okay, everybody gather around and, we're all going to do this one thing. And sometimes we still do that. But usually it's, we just do it. Hey, I'm doing this if anybody's interested and anybody wants to watch. Feel like that's less intrusive, and some kids are more interested in making different things. Some kids are more interested, we've got like what we call like the Dungeons and Dragons kind of kids, these long-haired boys, and they bring sticks or they make, and they just sword fight for hours and hours, and they're just whacking these sticks at each other.
Yeah.
And just how joyous, and that there's room for that in a group like this.
And they have their own rules around how they engage.
Yeah. And sometimes they'll spend hours just talking about the rules, like in this sort of made up world, in that kind of Dungeons and Dragons kind of way.
Yeah.
And it's really beautiful. And one time there was only one of those boys there one day. And so he invited me. And so I think you cut me something, a stick of a wattle or something. And I was fighting with him, and I realized I've never done this before. Spent hours just sword fighting and play fighting with a stick. I didn't grow up. I grew up in the suburbs in Melbourne. I've got 3 sisters. That was just not something that I ever did. So I was so sore by the end of the day, not from being whacked, but just sort of from the vibration of hitting a stick on his stick. And I really enjoyed it. And I was grateful for that.
Yeah. And another thing occasionally happens is rumbling. Another thing that's been taken away as like some sort of expression of male violence. It's the opposite. It's actually how, and not exclusively boys, but it's how boys learn limits. And in fact, I think pent up teenage boys, often because they haven't had access to mammalian play. And if you look at two fox cubs or even two kid goats or two goats play, how they play it looks like, quite rough, but it's actually not. It is. And, people get hurt occasionally, but bringing rumble or actually saying rumbling's fine, occasionally having to have a circle but that's very rare.
You want to explain what a circle is?
Yeah, just like our check-in circle in the morning. If someone's got hurt and feels like it was intentional rather than just an accident, we'll call a circle, and those involved and those witnesses will all go around it and just continue. Everyone speaks, no one interrupts until we get to the bottom of it. We might go around several times. It might only take one time of going around and everyone's going, oh yeah, no, I hear you now, blah, blah, blah. I apologize for that. It might take several if it's a really highly emotive thing. And sometimes we just also sit and let everything calm down first and then start to do the telling. So those sorts of things like rumbling, that's and play fighting is a rites of passage, or a rites of confidence that is really important. And it's we should also talk about maybe the close of the day.
Yeah.
usually very tired bodies and very tired blue wren and magpie coming back with beaming faces to meet the parents.
So our checkout circle, again, we'll all sit, and it doesn't necessarily have to be. Sometimes we go back to the fire circle. Sometimes we just have a circle wherever we are, and we each go around and we say our name, and we call it the thorns and berries and bush circle. So the thorn is the challenge, something that challenged you or something that you didn't like or that upset you or, in some way. The berry is something that you loved about the day, something sweet and delicious. And the bush is the integration of the two. So we have this really big hill that we sometimes walk up, and sometimes the kids will say, the bush, the hill was the bush, because it was really, really a struggle to get up. But when they got up, they realized, wow, what an achievement. And I didn't have to stop this time. I could just go up. So that's
particularly the little kids.
Yeah, the younger kids.
Particularly, and sometimes some of the 8-year-olds are so small. We just 8 is just an arbitrary age, but we do start it there.
Well, I think it's arbitrary.
But some of them are so small and carrying a pack all day, and then ascending this, what we call the Valley of Death or Pine Needle Gully, is a major challenge, and tears can come in that time, and that also often triggers a helpfulness from the older kids or a older sibling or one of us, to have compassion while at the same time make sure that this rites of confidence is achieved. And then the check-in circle at the end of the day, that little child who had tears because it was so hard for them, and it was the biggest maybe physical challenge of their life, probably was, until that point, sit in circle and expresses his or her bush, saying, my thorn was coming up Pine Needle Gully or the Gully of Death. But I was so happy when I got to the top and it was over, and now I feel amazing that I did it. That's my bush. So yeah, knowing that, that's another really important thing. Like, what we've tried to clear up out of children's lives is disappointment. And that is why there's so much anxiety and so much incompetence as they become young adults, is that learning hardships and disappointment, and that we come through them, is such a important skill, or such an important knowing or understanding. And so it's not the school of hard knocks, but there are challenges. And when younger kids see the older, or even just slightly older, the 9-year-olds scaling, and they're looking just slightly ahead of them, they know they can do it too. And when they prove to themselves they can do it, even if tears have come, tears of difficulty, that's not something to, oh no, don't do it, I'll carry you up, because that opportunity is missed. And so these are just really basic things. And if that 8-year-old was with a tribe of kids between 8 and 12, and they're on an adventure back in the 1950s or the 1970s, as we roamed, that little 8-year-old would be busting their boiler to keep up. And maybe the tears would be silent and no one would see them, but then they were there, and oh wow, yeah, so we're on to the next thing. So yeah, we might go to questions.
Before we do, I just wanted to talk about some of the games that we play with the kids, because we haven't mentioned those. So we have a number of games that we have adapted or created. We played this one last week, which is called Blood of the Blue Wren, which is where we're somewhere, and then Blue Wren will sneak off. And the kids, it's like a tracking game. Well, it's not like a tracking game. It's a tracking game. And the blood droplets are pieces of citrus peel, and that Patrick will leave as a little trail for us to find. And sometimes it's a very tricky, usually it's like off-track bush bashing through blackberries and gorse and mud and tree trunks and
old tunnels and
and yeah, sometimes the blood trail is quite hard to find. And as we say in the beginning, that in your mind, to the kids, in your mind, you can be a hunter who's wanting to come and kill this little bird and eat him, or you can be a rescuer who's coming to find this bird to rescue. And, who's a hunter? And the kids put their hands up. And who's a healer and a rescuer? And the kids. And it's usually the vegan or the vegetarian kids who are playing out that they're hunters. I love that always. That's really sweet. And that's really, really fun. And especially when you take us down these, traverse these really hard paths, up a mountain and then straight back down again and then up again. And the kids are just like, come on, I'm going to kill that bird as soon as we find him. And that's a lot of fun. And sometimes it can go on for hours and sometimes it's more short-lived. We play a game called Magpie's Nest. Which is sort of like there's a nest area and the kids have to hide. It's sort of like a Mr. Wolf game kind of thing where, they've got to, when I see a kid, I call them by the name, they've got to take 5 or 10 steps backwards as the first one into the nest.
Doing it in dense, scrubby bush is really, really
lots
important.
Of places to hide.
Yeah, so they've got to be able to,
Yeah. We do this thing called gum nuts where we write down on a piece of paper all the kids who were there, put it into a container. The kids pull out at the beginning of the day, they pull out a name, and then that's like a secret Santa kind of thing for the day, where the invitation is to be like extra kind and extra nice and maybe share something yummy from your lunchbox. But the catch is that person's not allowed to know that it's you directly. So you can't. So if I pull out Patrick's name, I'm not going to say, "Hey, Patrick, do you want some of my honey biscuits?" Because then it's a bit obvious. But if I say to the group,
and I won't know what magpie is meaning because I'm not Patrick out there on Blue Wren.
Yes. So. So that's also really fun. And at the end, at the checkout circle, we each go, as part of the checkout circle, we each go around and say who they think their gum nut is. And then when the person says, yes, it's them, or no, it was me, and then they also say what were some of the kind things or what was the kind thing they did during the day. And that's another thing I feel like in this culture, there's a lot of calling out toxic patriarchy or calling out bullying, but there's not that much calling in of the skills and the values that we are looking for and wanting to really cultivate. So we like to call out kindness. So often when a kid does something really lovely and generous, then we call it out. We make a big deal of that because kindness is something that we want to really promote in the group as a valued skill. And sometimes we joke that it's the Daylesford Kindness Club is like its nickname for Forest and Free.
But at the same time, not falling into the praise trap of just overpraising, because when I was a kid growing up, my childhood experience was the opposite. It was underpraising, and that was a wound that I've carried through my life. But overpraising is another wound. It's undeserved praising. So praise is really important at Forest and Free, but when it's highly deserved, when it's not just gratuitous praise. Yeah. So I think these things are really important getting right with kids, because also if you overpraise a kid, they just roll their eyes. Yeah. They don't believe it anyway. Or if they do believe it, it's maybe, the unhealthy part of the praise's ego is being received by the unhealthy part of the recipient's ego. Whereas, like beautiful in the moment praise for something truly praiseworthy is where Magpie and I are looking for all the time, because that's what we want to instill. So getting a good relationship with risk and safety, but also with grief and praise as well.
I've just got two more things before we go to questions. One is a book that we read when Woody was really little, called Free to Learn, by Peter Gray. He's an evolutionary biologist, just really looking at mammalian play, and the village model where the younger kids are looking to the older kids. We both really enjoyed that book. And I also wanted to talk about how in January of next year, 2027, we're going to be running our first rites of passage for the older kids as part of Forest and Free, which is going to be an overnight camp. So we're really looking forward to, we're planning that. We're, just giving that a lot of thought about what that looks like. And we've both Blue Red and I have been involved in the Castlemaine Rites of Passage community. Very grateful to have been part of that. We've both gone through as participants, and then spent a number of years as leaders. So really grateful for all of the knowledge and the learning that took place as part of being part of that program.
Yeah, and the age group of the kids at Forest and Free, 8 to 14, is a pre-initiation age. And so in a way, Forest and Free is preparing kids for a community-based rites of passage of some form. So ours will be more like a rites of confidence, as we mentioned before, which is like at about age 13, 14, and then about 15, 16 is a really good age for an initiation, a teenage initiation.
So in a lot of land-based cultures, they talk about a rite of confidence, especially for that age group, sort of 10 to 13, where the kids they display to the rest of their community the skills that they've learned, and they're honoured for that, for the skills. It's not quite a rite of passage.
Yeah, and I think I just finished the more formal.
I've got one more thing to say too.
All right, I'll finish up with just Forest and Free is just simply a practice for us adults of reconnecting people to place. And we do it with the men's and women's circle, as we discussed in the first session, online session from last week, guiding community rituals and men's and women's circles and grief circles, etc. But just Forest and Free is another part of our weekly cycle that's really focused on reconnecting people with place.
And we often see it as a medicine day, we call it, for ourselves. Like, if it wasn't for Forest and Free, we would never schedule a whole day in the forest together, like as a week, every week. It's such a gift that we get to spend
much in the homesteading. There's too many carrots to be fermented. There's too many goats' hooves to be clipped. There's too much firewood to get into the store. There's always so much in a home economy or a community economy. But by saying, no, this is the day we spend with kids in the forest, is, as Magpie says, it's a medicine day. It's a recuperation day.
And the last thing I wanted to say was that we have a chat group that we've set up on the Signal app with the families. And when a kid has come, 2 or 3 times, then the family's added to that group. And that's just a way, bring a fishing rod or bring bows and arrows this week, or make sure your kids have got enough water because it's going to be hot, or whatever it is. Or parents who can't make it and looking for lifts for their kid from other families. Or often if parents are wanting to give a gift and they, wanting some suggestions, we'll say, we're looking for seedlings this week, or we're looking for comfrey balm or something like that, just as a, it's just a really good way to, just to chat with the community.
I'm keen to open it up to questions if people have them.
So we'd prefer if you unmute yourself and then ask the question, or else if you want to put something in the chat, we can also read it.
Hello, it's Erin here. I have a question, if that's okay. That was fantastic. Thank you so much. And I was just wondering what size the space is that you're working with the area of the bush and the lake, or if they're connected, or just good to know.
Well, on a really big walking day, which we don't do every week, because we accept the feedback from the kids. But on a really big day, we might walk as much as 6 to 10 kilometers. So it's a large public forest reserve behind the town. So, but if we were to do it just at the fire circle and just in that little area where we started with the two early iterations of the forest kid group, that was probably a couple of acres in scale. But now we walk quite far.
It's a big range.
Do you have a follow-up question, Erin, for that? Is that
follow-up question, I suppose, would be whether I guess I'm thinking about whether to do a similar thing. I'd love to do a similar thing, whether to hold it on private land, which would be an option, or find a public space, and whether you've run into any issues holding it in a public space, whether, I don't know, anyone in the community is bothered by that, or has, or if somebody has sort of, I don't know if there's been issues around people worried about the children's safety or something, anything, I don't know. Have there been any problems?
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, we went into a part of the forest that's managed by Parks Victoria. So most of the forest is by the local council and ourselves as well. So we're part of a community managed forest so the council don't have to do that work. That's another big story I won't go into now. But so we've over the years, through with neighbours and with our goats and with hand tools, we've been managing fire risk and weed risk close to us. But we go much further out, and part of that forest comes into Jarrah Jandak. So it's managed by Parks Victoria, but also from Jarrah people, Jarrah rangers. Jarrah people are more and more becoming rangers and taking ownership, which is fantastic, and lots of really good stuff happening around forest gardening, and that mob is bringing in. But there were two Parks Victoria rangers, non-Indigenous rangers, that came up to our little fire, and we had kids sort of barefoot in the creek. It was
our faces painted with charcoal.
We had a beautiful fire going, and fishing rods out, and some boys were playing sort of baseball cricket with a stick and rocks, and there's people building cubbies, and so these two uniform. This is very rare that this happens, so it's interesting that you bring this up, because it's just happened, and so these two suited men came towards us, and I was sort of thinking, oh yeah, this will be interesting, but they were thankfully just deeply kind. They've been, even though it's the depth of winter and we've just had so much rain, like a foot of rain in the last couple of months, and there was absolutely no fire risk. That someone had reported there was a fire coming from the forest. It was actually drizzling. Anyway, they were really charming, and they came and just said, oh, we've just heard that there was a fire, and
Just coming to check it out.
Yeah, and they said, looks like you're having a lovely time, and waved to the kids and then walked away. So I think it's really just now, if we ask permission, what group is it? Do you have insurance? Rather than actually, we're just a community group. We're just a couple of parents with a whole bunch of kids. This is the thing. This is the dance. Because if we made this into a full business, that would the intention of it, but also the costs attributed to it would go right up. Whereas really, we're a homeschool network in a way. That's really what we're doing. Like intellectually, how we're sharing it is something much grander than that. But in its essence, on a Monday, we're a couple of homeschool parents with a whole bunch of other homeschool kids, and some kids that come out of school for the day. We've been asked by schools to, write some sort of report about what the kid that has it, the children that are coming out of the school, what they're experiencing and stuff. And, we might send them a video of what we've made about what we do from earlier years, but we will not be writing out any forms. This is about deinstitutionalizing our children, not institutionalizing our children. And I often say to parents, it's not the school's job to tell, if you see the value of Mondays at Forest and Free and then 4 days at school, then you as parents can argue that. We're not in Germany where, you'll be locked away. You can argue for that. Homeschooling is not illegal. It's actually, thankfully, in this country. So it's up to you whether you want your child to come here and whether you want to argue for it, because a bureaucrat will always make a bureaucratic decision on behalf of your child. Whereas
on behalf of you.
Yeah. Whereas you don't need to acquiesce to that.
I also wanted to say, we don't do this often with Forest and Free because it's in the day, but with the men's and women's circles, we always call the fire in the warmer months. We call the CFA and we let them know that we're going to have a fire. Yeah, but maybe we've done it once or twice with the kids.
If we're having a fire in summer.
Yeah, but we rarely do.
Yeah, we don't.
We rarely do.
We usually go swimming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Sorry, that was very long-winded a reply. Hopefully there's some
that
good
was
stuff
good.
in there.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks, Erin. Any other questions?
Hi. Hello.
Hello.
Hey.
Hi, I'm Sophie, and this is Phoebe. We're a home educating family, and my girls go to our local forest school a day and sometimes a bit more than that a week. But I'm really interested in sort of really honing that kindness between children and between each other, and how you kind of foster conflict resolution, or if you've ever had any instances of children being mean to each other, or and how that's managed, especially between younger children and older children. We've come up against that a bit in our community, and I just feel more and more like a real calling and passion to sort of learn how to, obviously I feel like I've got it down in my own family, in our family unit, but when we're interacting, with children that aren't my own, like, and how to deal with that, really. And if you've ever had anything crop up where and not necessarily just like an argument over, oh, I was using this and someone took it from me, but more just kind of, I don't know, a bit of bullying or just meanness that's not really immediately linked to a direct something that's happening right now. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah, this is a great question, and it's come up before. We've been approached by other parents to address this. Could I just ask some qualifying questions? Does your group have how many adults are leading the group?
So there are two adults. Yeah, there are two adults, and roughly around 10 children.
Yeah.
And the children age from, well, 14. 14 is the eldest. 14 is the eldest, and 15 is the eldest, and then 6 or 7 is the youngest.
Yep. Yeah. Yes. That's that range is quite is quite large. Particularly between the 6 and the youngest and the eldest. Also, are two, could I just ask the genders of the two facilitators or leaders?
Yeah, so they're both female
Yep.
facilitators. Every now and again, there's a male facilitator that will come in and pop in and support, but he's kind of in and out and he's not always there.
Yeah. And I'm going to make a guess that quite a lot of the unkindness is coming from boys.
Older boys.
It's actually quite, having spoken to other families, it's quite equal.
Okay.
But
okay.
it just manifests differently in the different genders.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And it's not always. And actually, we find that it's kind of in the middling group of ages. The elder children who are in fewer numbers I have never personally encountered or heard of any. They're really taking on really responsible, really fine roles. So
thank you. That's paints a much more detailed picture for us to respond to. Woody would like to join in here.
Hi.
Yes. So the question, Woody, is
did you hear the question? Or maybe repeat it.
Yeah, the question is around unkindness. How to when children are being unkind to others, to other kids. There's so many approaches. 10 kids, 2 adults. That's a pretty good distribution with an occasional other facilitator that comes in. Sometimes it's just 1 or 2 children who have come with really big wounds, really big stories. The wound in them wants to wound others. And I think for me, understanding what the wound is as the adults, and not necessarily by needing to know their story, because that may be deeply personal and unwilling to share, but by a kind of radical compassion towards where that unkindness comes from. And that unkindness can become, unfortunately, infectious, so that the wounds in one will then wound another, and then the wounds in that other will then wound, and it can quickly escalate. So I think developing in the group a real consciousness around wounds, and even to talk about not people's wounds specifically, but to have like a wound circle. And to at an age appropriate level where the setup is to just to I guess pass on to every child that unfortunately our species is a wounding species, but that doesn't necessarily have to be a gloomy thing. It's actually, the more we are aware of our wounds, and the more aware that when we are wounded, we are more likely to wound others, and bring a collective awareness, and to keep coming back to this, not in any form of shaming, but actually in an acceptance for the human condition of wounding. And the wounding into others from our own wounds needs consciousness, and that consciousness can really shift something quite quickly. So it does take a little bit of confidence in an adult to lead that, particularly if none of us are psychologists, but as community, well, I mean, I'm making an assumption there. We're not psychologists, and it's not the work of psychologists. This is community work. This is the work of each of us to understand how our wounds operate in the world, and why there is so much unkindness.
I think on a more practical a more practical response, also some things that we do. Sometimes we just say to each other, we need to shift the energy.
Yeah.
So we'll stop what we're doing and then we'll just move. Like,
Yeah.
okay, we're on the, or everybody come over here and we're going to collect bracken fern to make more thatching for the village hall shelter.
Or
yeah.
really just look for a project, or for particularly a child that is carrying the weight of their wound and it's coming out in a real darkness, to work with them really quickly. So it's such a dance.
It is.
But it's also knowing, like, sort of, that we're not always going to get it right, but the invitation to a child or children that are to do something really positive, like to dig a hole for a tree, or to, I don't know, to set up something, or to, I
think just one more thing, and then also because of Zephyr and his story, and he was a tricky kid, and to not pathologize the older kid who's being a little bit mean just because we had a kid that some of the parents or some of the kids didn't want to associate with. So just making sure that there's always a belonging place for every kid who wants to come. Yeah.
Yeah, usually when other kids have kind of got a little bit bullied is when we're playing like a game, like two teams against each other. And if there's a younger kid or a kid that we have this game called Tree Ball, where it's like a catching game and you got to catch it. So the kid who isn't good at catching drops it, keeps dropping it. Some kids, including myself, a few times, can get a bit frustrated. So that's when that's generally happened in the past at Forest and Ferry.
And then in the quieter moments, I've even heard you say, let's call in those kids in and say, do you want to do some tree ball catching? Because the tree ball is a ball, mate, that we've carved out of a tree. And it's hard. It's really hard. It's not like cricket ball hard, but it's still hard on the hand. So, to invite those kids, and some of the...
To suggest to the older kids, why don't you invite those kids and just have a one-on-one and just start a meter apart and just catch it, and then step back, and then just step back and step back. And very quickly, that is an act of love. When an older kid comes to the child and says, actually, I know I've been a bit tough on you. I haven't been able to control my emotions and put you down a bit.
That before, and then like one week I've been like really frustrated with this kid, and then the next week I was like, sorry about last week. Do you want to do some catching? And then just if you do a bit every week, they just improve really quickly.
Yeah.
Have you got a follow-up question,
Sophie?
No, I think that's a really good way to think about it, and just also how we can use those things and foster them in the community, because often some of us are together in different groupings but not within the forest school also. So just to, I don't know, have that common thread of how we look after one another and things is I think we could use that across our settings also.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And Phoebe, what's some of the things that you love to do with your group?
What do you like to do?
Making walking sticks.
Making walking sticks.
Wow.
Playing in the mud kitchen.
And playing in the mud kitchen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
Yeah, that's great. And does your group have a name?
Bright Start.
Bright Start. Nice.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thanks for coming along to this session.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. Thank you. It's good to talk to you. Thank you, Woody, too.
Any other questions?
I have a question, if I may.
Yeah. Okay.
Hello. Thank you for this afternoon. So I volunteered on a bushcraft course for kids earlier this year, and there was some lovely neurodivergent kids there. And I suppose I was curious with how you guys manage that in your space, and whether it's something that you lean into or you lean away from, or if you place emphasis on that or take emphasis off of that, and just how you approach that in your space.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's a great question. In a way, we answered it earlier about the diversity of the forest takes the diversity of the children. And so, therefore, we do, like, while we're interested and open to what parents bring in terms of uh, how children have been assessed, I feel we're doing a greater service to the child by not holding them in that. And because of just what we've said, that the forest is a forest of diversity. And if a child identifies as ember, or a child identifies as a possum, or a mushroom, or a bird, or a marsupial of some other form, that's their permission to step into, firstly, some shape shifting and connection with more than human life. But step away from what I think, and maybe this is again just a lay perspective, but a hyper pathologization of children. And it's not to say that well, it is to say that there is a huge spectrum of child expression, and only a small spectrum, a small part of that spectrum is acceptable in a conventional classroom. But in a forest, as Meg said earlier, that diverse spectrum is not a spectrum, it's just normal. Mm-hmm. So I feel like that's why we're so passionate in this age of hyperpathologization or labeling of children. And maybe those labels are a comfort, particularly to parents, or a comfort to the child. I'm not denying that, particularly if they've come from an institutional setting, because it gives agency in that setting. It gives permission to be oneself in a highly conformed and colonial structure, like an industrial school. It's very different in a forest ecology, where the forest is the teacher, is the main guide, and there is not those random judgments or colonial structures. And
there isn't one way to do something. There's diversity is welcome.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Or do you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, no, that's all that's all very helpful. I think obviously it's part of a broader discussion about neurodivergence and children in society and whatnot. And yeah, my own experience, facilitating, trying to teach bush skills to kids, with kids that needed more attention than others and needed more time spent on them, and weighing that against, facilitating the rest of the group and things like that.
I think just to pick up there, if we were trying to teach the whole group one thing, and that we had to do that. That was like a mandate of whatever school or institution that we were part of. Curriculum. It would all go to shit. Yeah. Whereas what we do is we get to a place. I say, who's interested in fire making today? Who has never lit a fire by friction, who wants to give it a go? And there will usually be a couple of kids that are really good at it, and maybe one or two kids that are ready on that particular day. So everything is an invitation. And Magpie might be...
And I'll say, who wants to get moving, and let's collect some kindling and firewood. And, bring your axes, let's go.
Yeah. So in that setting, in a more formal situation where all the kids have to learn this lesson on this day, that does make it hard, and it sets up failure for both the instructor or the teacher or the adult, as it does for the kids. And so this is how we're trying to decolonize learning, that mother country is the guide, and then the children themselves are the secondary guides, and all we do is we come with a whole lot of knowledges, and they're always building, so that when we come across a big group of wood bluets like we did the other day, we talk about what a good eating mushroom this is, how to identify it, because if you turn it upside down, it's a particular color, and its lookalike, which is toxic, that can be foraged nearby in the forest. This is how you discern between the two. So like that's the forest popping up these mushrooms. We just happen to be coming along because I randomly have said we're going in a southwesterly direction today. And then all of a sudden we're in the chance. So, I'm recognizing that makes it easier than, say, being in one specific location. But I think this is the thing about the drift, or the ability to move through land and a country and be open and curious. And so as an adult, it's like looking for opportunities to bring the group in. And then if you start to see some of the kids like completely tune out and starting to sword fight, that's cool too. That's absolutely fine that that happens. So that there isn't really huge amounts of disruption, because we're not trying to force people to learn anything at a particular time. Where we're making offerings throughout the day.
Mm.
Yeah. Thanks. Somebody asked, thanks, Simon. Somebody asked in the chat if we have any other book recommendations. Do you have any?
On this particular,
what's that? I know a lot of people use it, the Coyote's Guide to something. What is it? We've got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't find it especially helpful. But I know quite a lot of people do use that as a text for different bush groups.
Yeah.
Coyote's Guide to something.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of children and rites of passage and rites of confidence, I think Martin Prechtel's work is fantastic. He is like a big, like in so many aspects of our lives, he not just children, but revillaging. His work is amazing. Long Life, Honey in the Heart, I highly recommend.
Yeah, that's it. Coyote's Guide to Connecting with Nature. That's the book.
Yeah. But really, I think we've learned by just not. Yeah, I think it's difficult. Like if we were professionals in this, even though both of us have taught at tertiary and secondary and primary levels as sort of guest teachers, and so we have experience, and also we're parents, and also we're community people, so we have experience with being with kids. So that's not alien to us. But I just keep going back to country is the book. Mother Country tells us everything. There is just this endless encyclopedia of givings and wisdoms. So while books are, can be supplementary, that again, it comes back to an animist opening to life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also to spend time without the kids for us has been really important. Like to go out every year on a 3 or 4 day, 3 night or 4 night vigil by ourselves in the forest and fast and just, see what comes, empty out and see what arises, has also been really important. Exactly that, like just to be in the forest and to have that relationship. It's not like we're in our homestead for every other day and then we just arrive in the forest. We're constantly in the forest. It's just part of our world. I reckon we've got time for one last question, if anybody has one.
I do, if there's a short amount of time. Yeah.
Yep.
Hi, my name's Matt. That was great. Very nourishing. Thank you. Just to, I guess, segue off the last question. We've sometimes noticed that the pop culture creeps in quite a lot to this work, and I guess some of what you were speaking about before was, I guess, a kind of a self-directed approach, like not to enforce a curriculum, but let kids do what they do, and that might be stick fighting. what we've sometimes seen with older kids is that stick fighting can soon become mimicking gaming and stuff like that. And I just was wondering where your sort of guardrails are there, because I'm always mindful of how do we recreate a new culture. And it's just very interesting how the system and pop culture can be so pervasive and subversive in what we try to do in language, in right and wrong, in good and evil, in battles and fighting. Yeah, I'm just wondering how you sort of deal with that if you have to.
As you say, the pop culture is pervasive, but again, not having like a purity politic about it as well,
But
because
it's not giving it oxygen.
not giving it oxygen. Sometimes we are actually quite blatant and say, yeah, maybe don't bring that to Forest and Free.
Yeah.
We're really trying to create a bubble here for kids so that they can be free of that for the whole day.
Yeah.
You might say something quite explicit. In fact, I say stuff like that quite often.
So something that we haven't talked about is that there are no devices. So no phones, no digital cameras, even smart watches. You know, once we went for a walk and there was one of the kids who was counting steps and talking about how many calories we'd all burned, even stuff like that. It's like, there's no room for that here. That, you know, you can do that for the rest of your week if that's important to you, but let's just have a day of just being here. Oh, that's another thing that we haven't mentioned, talking about just being here, is when kids ask a future question, what are we going to do next? How long are we going to be here? Are we going to go to the village today? And the answer is
all will be revealed.
And the kids hate it when we say it, because it's like, what time is it? Is it lunchtime? Or it's Forest and Free time, or all will be revealed. And that's, it's sort of like a joke that we have, and the kids pretend to hate it. But, you know, that's like, be present. Let's just be here.
Yeah. And, you know, part of that pervasive culture is clock time. And while Magpie and I have to know when it's 10 o'clock and when it's 4 o'clock for drop off and pick up.
When lunchtime is, like, we yell out lunchtime.
Well, but that's a feeling. That's a feeling, like, are people getting a bit ratty? Am I feeling hungry? Like, okay, we're going to stop by this creek and make lunch, and kids go, yay, because, you know, a lot of kids are just having a good time and then have forgotten to eat. So not that, so lunchtime is, again, it's felt, it's intuition rather than a particular time. But the pervasiveness of the dominant culture is clocks, and so we're really trying to, at least within that time, dissolve clock time and be in ecological time.
And just in terms of junk culture and food, that it's nude food.
Yeah, and like there's lots of conversations around with the kids about what good nutrition is in terms of like feeling good throughout a whole day in the forest, because particularly in winter months like now, it takes a huge amounts of energy to be burnt to stay warm. And then in the summer months, we often walk for a long while through the forest to a really nice watering hole, and that takes a lot of energy being in that heat and the walking. So so there's lots of opportunities, rather than shaming people around food, but just to bring up how good food nourishes us and how good food is good for the planet, and because we're part of that, we're extensions of a biome. And what we eat is our energy, it's our fuel. And so when children are being physical, like they are on Mondays, then it's not like the feedback loop about what they eat is often quite revealing.
And also the kids see what we eat as well.
Say to parents, make sure you pack more food than you ordinarily would, like if you were just going for like a normal, like packing a normal lunchbox, because the kids are much more physical at Forest and Free, so they always eat way more and drink way more.
Yeah. Well, we might leave it there. Thank you so much, everybody. Yeah, that was great. Thanks so much. So we're going to be recording Don't worry, Abdullah, because we recorded the session and we're going to be sending it out to everybody who booked a place on this session, and also we're going to be putting it on our blog, a video recording and audio too.